Good afternoon. As I always say at the beginning of these videos, I am neither a videographer or an actor, so please forgive the fact that this is intended just to convey content to you in an accessible way and not meant to represent a professional level or quality of video. I've been wanting to make this video for several days, as I mentioned, had some difficulties with Camtasia, but a couple of things I wanted to draw your attention to, some of which I pointed out yesterday in an announcement I sent to you via Blackboard. So a couple of things in terms of activity one and all the things you should think about as you move forward in this class. It is really important that you read all of the prompts very carefully and all of the information in the assignment and the unit guide. I also strongly suggest that you look at the rubric for each assignment and kind of use that as a self-check for yourself, and it will almost always say the response is complete, and that means that you addressed every single item that I included in the prompts. Second thing, just in terms of something to consider as we're working on our understanding and ability to describe specific behaviors. I mentioned in class that lots of times teachers interpret behavior rather than describing them accurately, or interpret behaviors rather than describing them accurately. So please be very, very careful with the language that you use. So terms like never, always, constantly should be avoided because they are not accurate when you describe behavior. If someone always did something, it would mean they never stopped, right? Or if they never did something, it would mean not one time in their lives had that been evident. And while that may be very occasionally true in terms of behavior, as I mentioned, almost never accurate. Same is true with constantly. If I do something constantly, it means I do not stop. And usually all children will take a break from some behaviors at some times. The other thing I really want to make sure you understand is how important it is not to use the term bad when describing behavior. And I know it's something that we all do in everyday speech, but it is far too easy for teachers and others to think about bad behavior being something that is done by a bad student. We want to separate the student from their behavior, and I have found that avoiding the use of the word bad assists us in doing that. So at that point, we can talk about an inappropriate behavior or an ineffective behavior, and that is far more accurate than saying it is bad, which is very pejorative, and like I said, it tends to wind up being assigned to kids, and so a child who engages in, quote, bad behavior later is known by teachers as a bad kid. And the last thing, I just use the word kid informally. That's fine. You use it all the time in your everyday speech. But remember that in this class, we're also working on practicing our professional writing, and so you need to use the word student or use the word children instead. I know that I talk to you every semester about the importance of using APA style for your citations, etc. Now, if you are citing your textbook and it is an informal assignment like one of these small activities, it is fine with me if you just parenthetically note Kerr and Nelson and the year, or Kerr and Nelson the year and the page number if you're using a direct quote. If you are quoting anything else, you need to include a reference list and include a citation. That would include videos that I assign to you and other things, because it's really important that you get in a habit of citing your sources. Also, if you read in Kerr and Nelson something that another author said, you need to look at how APA style recommends that you deal with a secondary source, because you shouldn't be quoting someone cited in Kerr and Nelson unless you actually went and read that document yourself. If you have questions about that, please, please, please let me know. You have assignment due to me on Thursday. I'd like to go through and just give you a couple of brief reminders about that assignment. So I'm going to also take a minute to get into your course folder. I'm going to go into the unit guide for Unit 2. And again, I would strongly suggest that you read through the material carefully. My screen will look a little bit different than yours, but it tells you what things you're to read, what is expected. So this week on the 16th, you have due activity B and your unit quiz. There is an objective there that talks about the fact that in this unit, we're wanting to apply critical concepts of ABA, applied behavioral analysis, and functional behavioral assessment. And I want you to become familiar with key vocabulary that is used with respect to those two processes, okay? I tell you a little bit of, give you some hints there and highlights of things to be thinking about and things to be considering as you're going through your daily work. On activity B, and you'll also notice, by the way, that I have some links. There you have a link to the Unit 2 quiz, and then I gave you also some additional links on how behavior plans are developed and particularly based on functional behavioral assessments. So if you're feeling the need for more information, those are certainly not the only places you can go, but they are two places that might be helpful to you. But let's look at learning activity B. Well, if I can get it open. Okay, here we go. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to define and discuss the 6 principles of applied behavior analysis. And one of the things that I recommend you do in answering all of these questions is try to think about what these very complex terms really mean in your own words, because that will help you to better understand them and apply them out in your work. So think about those 6 practices. What are those really saying? And then give a real-life example of how each principle affects behaviors. So you can give an example from your classroom, from your life, from your family. There are many, many places that you can give examples of human behavior that will demonstrate those principles, and any of them are fine. Then I want you to summarize the process for developing a BIP and discuss the role of an FBA in BIP development. So anytime that we do a BIP, we should have previously done a functional behavior assessment to determine under what circumstances does that behavior occur, what function does it appear to serve as for the child, because that's where we get the information that will allow us to develop an appropriate intervention. Then I want you to think about the particular behavior you're going to work on for your behavior intervention or change plan. So that's something that you're going to be working on. That's not due till the end of the semester, but it's not something I want you to do the last couple of weeks of the semester. I want you to have it very well conceptualized. Then you have to collect some baseline data, then have an intervention period, and then evaluate your results. So this is a long-term project. So at this point, what you need to do is think about what is the behavior you're going to address. As I mentioned in class, it can be a behavior that you want to work on with a student that you have out in the schools if you're a teacher. It can be a behavior that you want to work on with someone else you know if you're not in a classroom. I've had students do things. I had a student who was working at the Naval Air Station and developed a BIP for the pilots that she provided support services to in terms of how they would interact with her. I've had people do BIPs to address behaviors that they themselves engaged in, like smoking and eating more than they should and things like that. I think that it's a little more difficult to do a BIP on yourself, but it can be done. And so if you're having difficulty thinking of a behavior to address, please contact me, and I promise I can help you come up with something. And then I want you to create a behavioral objective. This may not be your final behavioral objective because you haven't actually gathered your baseline data. But remember that a behavioral objective includes a condition, so the circumstances under which you expect the behavior to occur, the behavior itself, and then the criteria, the way in which you know that that person that you're working with has mastered or improved, the degree to which they will improve their performance of that targeted behavior. Okay? Once you've done that, and there are some excellent examples in your text of behavioral objectives, then I want you to conduct a task analysis and think, what are all the things that the person will have to be able to do in order to demonstrate that targeted behavior? So again, quality behavior objective, condition, behavior, criteria, and then an analysis of the tasks that would have to be achieved in order for that objective to be met. The last thing that you need to do for this particular unit is create some vocabulary or define some vocabulary that is critical to your understanding of this content. You're going to see this set of vocabulary words all semester long. And so what I want you to do is either define them and just submit them. You can do a Quizlet file. You can do a set of flashcards if you can find me a copy of them. But I want you to be able to define these terms, and I want you to define them thoroughly, but also, again, in a way that makes sense for you. Okay? So you do not have to give me the definition out of your textbook, but you should think about putting that definition into your own words in a way that makes sense. And provide examples, again, of those definitions. That will, again, further help you to understand what they're meaning and to be able to use them appropriately. As always, if you have questions about any of the information I just provided, please don't hesitate to contact me, and I look forward to seeing all of your assignments on Thursday evening. Take care. I will also, within the next day or two, be posting a video explaining what you need to be thinking about as you're designing your classroom management poster project. Bye-bye.